Hi, everyone. Welcome to my podcast, Help Me, Rhonda. I'm your host, Dr. Rhonda Karg, and each episode I present mental health-related information to you. And today I have a special guest named Jonathan, and I've known Jonathan for a while. We've worked together in psychotherapy, and he was kind enough to volunteer to come on my podcast and tell his story about what happened, what it was like, and what it's like now as a result of his psychotherapy. So thank you so much for joining me today, Jonathan. It's good to see you.
Thanks for having me. I feel so important being on a podcast.
You are such an inspirational person. You know that. I've told you that. You are one of the strongest, most resilient people I've ever met. You've been through so much in your life, and you worked so hard. You still work hard in psychotherapy to get better, and I really appreciate you. So I'm excited to hear more about your story today in terms of, your perspective on what happened, what it was like for you in the aftermath, and then how you were able to heal from that. So I'm really interested in hearing this today.
Okay. Sounds good. Where should we start?
Well, let's start at the beginning.
Okay.
Let's start at the beginning.
Let's see. My father, I started growing up in a small town in Pennsylvania. We were renting a house, but it got sold out from under us. So my dad planned to go to this Bible college and take us all there in Indianapolis, I think it was. I vaguely remember traveling to visit there with him, but that Bible college closed down right as we were packing the truck. And 8 months prior to that, my grandfather, my father's father, had just passed away. So his house in Arkansas was open. So we just loaded everything in the truck and drove south. And maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. My dad suffered a traumatic brain injury on a construction site. A beam was dropped on his head, split his head open, and then his employer tried to screw him over. And through that, somehow, my father turned very strongly towards Christianity. And my dad took everything super seriously. So as soon as he did that, he decided that it was in my best interest and that of my older sister to start paddling us every morning to remove the original sin. And so immediately he started going way too far, going to a radical extent on this religious belief. And he just made terrible decisions constantly. He hired a babysitter who molested my sister and I. And this was all back in Pennsylvania before we even moved. And after we moved, it just got even worse because we got down to Arkansas and found a whole host of radical people hiding out in the woods and living off the grid. And So he kind of found his people down there. And he firmly believed that Y2K was going to end society as we know it, and everything would come crashing down, and it was going to be every man for himself. So he spent an enormous amount of money on solar, windmills, food, fertilizer, buried a big tank of diesel in the ground.
Whoa.
We bought, we had 4 assault rifles and many other firearms and tons of ammunition. He was preparing for war. So I grew up from the age of 5 believing that that society was going to collapse, and according to Dad and all the people he hung out with, the New World Order was going to come for all the Christians and put us in concentration camps and take away our Bibles and our guns. So I grew up believing that it was my duty to fight this war that was right around the corner.
Mm.
So from the age of 5, I spent all my time training physically and mentally to fight this war that my father imagined was going to happen.
Mm.
We listened to Alex Jones on the shortwave radio every morning.
I'm not familiar with Alex Jones. Who's that?
Oh, you got to look him up.
Okay, let me write that down.
Or don't.
Let me write that down.
You might preserve some sanity if you don't look him up. He's a guru of conspiracy theories.
Oh, got it.
He helped coordinate the January 6th assault on the Capitol.
No.
Yeah, he was there.
Okay,
he didn't participate, but he helped coordinate.
Got it.
So listening to Alex Jones spew conspiracy theories all day long did terrible things for my father's mental health. It just made him even more paranoid, and so we were being homeschooled. My father refused to send us to public school because they would teach us, evolution and I don't know, that gays are real humans and not perverts, is what he called them.
Wow.
So one day, the Department of Human Services was sending a social worker around to all the homeschooling families in the area, asking them to sign an intent to homeschool form. And my understanding is that this form would just require that the children go to the school once a year to take a test to see how they were, if they were actually learning anything.
Mm-hmm.
My dad refused to sign that, and immediately told the social workers to get off his property. And then he went in and called everyone else in our group of crazy people,
Mm-hmm.
that these social workers were on their way to see them. So they all either shut their gates so the DHS people couldn't get in, or just refused to talk to them. I heard that one of the fathers signed the form in disappearing ink. I don't know if that's actually true, but I thought it was funny. So then DHS, I guess, decided to press the issue and took my father to court over it. So my dad was convinced that they were going to send the police to abduct me and my siblings and put us in foster homes, uh, put him in jail and stuff. So he sent us and our mother into hiding.
Mm.
And for, I think it was a little over a year, we bounced around the backwoods of Arkansas and Missouri, hiding out with different families.
Mm.
Um, what's weird is I don't actually remember how the legal battle ended.
Mm.
We were eventually able to come home, but I don't recall like how he settled it. But
Mm.
he didn't hire a lawyer either. He bought 2 sets of legal books. So he had a whole wall of legal books and
Mm.
spent all his time studying law and fought this legal case on his own. Which at the time, thought he was like a superhero doing this.
Sure, sure.
It
I
was
mean, you're
amazing.
a kid, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
I worshipped him.
of course.
Um, but when we finally did come home, he was uh, even more paranoid, and started talking about people threatening him in public. Um, Trying not to get ahead of myself.
It's okay.
Um, I guess eventually, um, after we finally came home from hiding, um, Dad had, like I said, become even more paranoid, and he became convinced that all the people in our homeschooling, um, you know, anti-government survivalist group, that they were all turning on him.
Mm.
And I remember waking up one morning, walking out into the living room, and Dad was on the phone with one of the other guys in our group, and he was saying to this guy, "I finally figured it out. You're trying to take me out so you can steal my solar system."
Okay.
And I asked my dad about it once he hung up, and he said, according to him, the guy on the other end of the line just chuckled and said, "Oh, you figured me out, huh?"
Ah, he was being sarcastic.
Yeah, in retrospect, I think he was just like, "Yeah, whatever, you're being crazy." Um, but I don't know. Didn't hear the other side of the conversation.
So how old were you at this point, Jonathan?
13.
13. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I was 13 that day. Um, so Dad woke the rest of the family up, had us pack our bags again. We were going back into hiding because this time our friends were turning on us. And so he made arrangements to send us to this Christian, like a, I don't know, like a re-education camp is what I view it as in hindsight, called Heartland
Okay.
in Missouri.
Okay.
And this place, you can look it up. They've actually been raided by the feds for child abuse, or I'm not entirely sure what the raid was about, but it happened.
Wow.
Oh man. So yeah,
So you went there, you're in Missouri, your dad sent you there.
he sent us away. We drove 6-7 hours to the Missouri border, and we were going to spend the night with this family with whom we had hidden prior. We're just going to spend the night there and drive the rest of the way the next day. But my mother stayed up late talking to the husband of that family, telling him what was going on and how dad was acting so strangely, and she was scared and not really had no idea what was going on. So he convinced my mother that something was seriously wrong and we should go back and check on dad. And I don't know what we were supposed to do after that, but so the next morning we got up and we drove back, and we couldn't find my father anywhere. Yeah.
Okay, so the next morning, yeah.
Yeah, so the next morning we got up and we drove 7 hours back home. And when we got there, the front door had been broken in. The hinge, or not the hinge, but the latch was busted out. Someone had forced the door open. And we couldn't find my father anywhere. So we checked with a couple neighbors. We checked with the guy who was stashing some of our assault weapons for the time being. He wasn't there. My sister and I noticed that the fence had been pushed down, leading down towards the woods. So my sister and I crossed the fence and went down to the tree line about a quarter mile away and called for dad and looked around, but there was nothing. So we went back home, waited a couple of really stressful hours, and then in the later afternoon, sometime around 4, I think, sheriff cars started tearing down the road to the Christmas tree farm right next door. So Mom ran down there in a bit of a panic, asking if they had found my dad, and they told her she needed to go back to the house. Some time passed, and the sheriff came up to our house and told Mom that they found my dad dead in the woods with 2 gunshot wounds to the back of the head.
So you assumed that he had been murdered?
Yes. Yeah,
For
absolutely.
Sure. Yeah.
His Glock 9mm was there, and that was the murder weapon. So I assumed that our group had in fact turned on us and executed my dad in the woods with his own handgun.
Right, right.
So I I don't know. The rest of that day is just a blur. I remember
Mm-hmm.
some friends came over. Um, all the neighbors brought us food over the next few days. Uh, but I now believed that, well, my father had died. I was now the man of the house at 13.
Mm-hmm.
And it was my responsibility to defend the family, not only from the government that I still believed was just at any moment a SWAT team would come roaring down the road to arrest us.
Mm-hmm.
So not only from the government, but also from our own social group. Um, so I started sleeping with my dad's 357 revolver under my pillow and the AR-15 like tucked under the bed, so I could just roll
Mm-hmm.
over and grab it, and a
Mm-hmm.
shotgun by the door, and I made sure my mother had her revolver loaded and ready to go, and I made all these plans for when they come. Here's what I want you to do, and I spent the next few years assuming that they were going to come and kill the rest of us at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that really stuck with me was I spent a lot of time imagining how it was going to happen. And I was I was not going to I was not going to give up and stop fighting until I was dead on the ground. Um, and I was going to kill as many of them as possible before they killed me.
Mm-hmm.
So from the age of 5 to 13, I was, you know, thinking about fighting a war as a guerrilla soldier. And then from 13 to on through my teens, I was still thinking about that, but also thinking about having to defend the house and the family from all the people we used to trust. And it was virtually all I thought about. And it it left a serious mark.
I can imagine. Yes, I know. It really did. So
Yeah.
what ways, well, let me ask you this. I'll go ahead and jump to when you reached out to me for psychotherapy, what was going on in your life at that time? What made you decide you needed help?
Um. Hmm. I was for. I mean, even years before I met you and we started working together, um, I was having panic attacks, um, uh, extreme hypervigilance, and
Sure.
I couldn't go outside in the woods. I couldn't go outside at night in the woods. Um,
Mm-hmm.
uh, any
Nightmares.
yes, always nightmares about being hunted, a lot of nightmares about being executed. It was always someone chasing me, hunting me, trying to kill me. And so that had been going on for quite some time before you and I started working together.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, depression as well.
Yes.
I was really, really depressed during all of that.
Mm-hmm. I think also once you gained perspective on what had happened and realized that your dad wasn't actually executed, that it was a suicide.
Right.
That
That's
was
where
a
I need to go next.
point for you, and it brought up a whole other set of feelings and things to work through, because all this time you had thought that he had been murdered, and now realizing that he had committed suicide, and then realizing all of your childhood was messed up as a result of your dad, and that you really, you had a very, very extreme, like I would say the most traumatic childhood I've heard of in terms of the severity of that trauma, in the sense of the constant fear and the paranoia, and telling you that at 13 years old, no, even younger than that, that it was your job to protect the family. And you and I have worked together for a couple of years. Now we see each other much less. You are doing so well.
Yeah.
You have worked so hard in psychotherapy, and today you don't even have PTSD anymore, which is pretty amazing. You have some symptoms, but you no longer have PTSD, which is just like so incredible. And that's a testament to the hard work and dedication, because every week I would, because I'm solution focused, would come up with intentions, things for you to work on during the week, because that's the time that's really where the rubber meets the road. It's the work you do outside of therapy. And you were always so dedicated and so diligent about doing your homework and doing the best that you can. And you're still dealing with, you deal with extreme chronic pain, and yet you've still been able to recover from your PTSD, and you're doing so much better today. Can you share with the audience what you found to be the most helpful parts of psychotherapy?
Yeah. I think we did the gratitude lists, and at first I remember being a bit skeptical. It just seemed kind of silly that writing down things I was thankful for was going to fix any of the problems, any of the things I was dealing with. But I still stuck with it, and we did the observe and describe exercises every week.
Right, the mindfulness, yep.
Emotion meditation, and the EMDR.
Yes.
Yeah, I think those were the most helpful activities.
It probably also helped you to just share your story and receive validation and emotional support for everything that you've been through. Because I feel like that's an important part of psychotherapy, is just getting that support from somebody, and that unconditional positive regard, somebody that really cares about you and is like your biggest fan, cheering you on and like encouraging you when it was hard. And like we talk about when we prep for this podcast, in terms of saying to the audience, this is hard work. Psychotherapy is hard.
Yeah.
And it can be intimidating and it can be overwhelming because you look at the things that have happened in your life and you can look at the difficulties that you've been having, that you've been trying to fix on your own. And when you show up on the doorstep of a psychotherapist, you can feel overwhelmed and not very, hope doesn't usually come until later. You can feel pretty powerless and hopeless in the beginning, even when you seek out psychotherapy. But you stuck with it, and it was hard work, but it really paid off for you. And like today, you're doing so great.
Yeah,
I mean,
really
you really are. You really are.
Yeah, it's so much better.
What are the other things that you've noticed being different and better for you? Like in terms of the symptoms?
I'm not hypervigilant anymore. That's a big one.
That's huge.
It is huge because I nearly attacked one of my partner's friends. She came over to the house unannounced. We were, this was back in Pennsylvania, before my partner and I moved down here. My girlfriend knew that she was coming over, but I didn't. I just returned from work, and I heard the back door open and close. And as far as I knew, there was no one supposed to be coming in our house. So I ran through the house and came around the corner to the back door with my fists up and ready to just pummel whoever had just come in my house. And it was just our friend.
It's amazing. Think about it is a miracle. It's nothing short of a miracle that more people were not hurt, because when you're at that level, when you have that many guns and you're at that level of hypervigilance, man, somebody shows up unexpected, that could have gone very wrong. Yeah.
It's not even when someone actually shows up. I don't know, maybe a month after my dad died. I woke up in the middle of the night and nothing had really happened. I just woke up and I was just completely overcome by terror. There was someone in the house. I was sure of it. They were here. So I pretended to be asleep, but I had my pistol pointing at the door, and I'm so thankful that my mother didn't get up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, because she would have walked right past my door.
Oh, wow.
And I was such a wreck that night.
Oh, man.
In the house, but I was convinced they were there.
Sure.
It was the most intense terror I've ever felt. It was really, really something else.
I'm really glad that nothing bad happened. I really am so grateful. I really am. And it's a miracle that it didn't, really. Seriously. Wow. So, another thing I want to just point out to the listeners is that you also do a really good job taking care of yourself and making sure that you practice good self-care in terms of like the ways that you spend your time with your music and with your models and with your online community, and you guys are able to have like that you're able to get that social interaction and things like that, and have developed friendships. I mean, the fact that you have the ability to trust other people, I also feel like is a miracle. That you would even trust me enough to come to me for psychotherapy. I think that's a real testament to your life force, your will to live and to heal. And you are such a great example of how psychotherapy works, You're a perfect example of a success story, but you're also just a really great example of thriving in the face of adversity. That's why I wanted to have you on today, was because you're such an incredible person and you haven't allowed your trauma to harden you. You still have a beautiful, compassionate, loving, gentle soul and spirit to you, despite everything that you've been through. So, you know, you're just an incredible person. I'm so grateful that I know you and had the pleasure to work with you, still work with you. And I want to thank you again for joining us today, because I think that people are going to be really inspired by your story. You don't often get to hear what it was like growing up in a right-wing militia family like that. You don't often hear those stories, because the kids that are raised in those environments typically turn out to be right-wing militia as well.
Yeah.
So, you know, you were able to escape that. You were able to escape that. And it's such an incredible story. So thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate your time. And I actually learned more about you today.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, absolutely. So I'm glad that you were on the podcast today. I really appreciate it.
Me too.
And
Thanks for having me.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you soon. I'll see you in a couple weeks.
Take care. Thank you.
Yeah, you too, Jonathan. Thanks again. Okay.
Bye-bye.